We are halfway through the week. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Kim in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. President Moon Jae-in addressed the National Assembly for the second time since taking office, advocating policies for job creation, increased household income, and improved social welfare. The Olympic torch relay began its nationwide journey on Wednesday, running until the opening ceremony of the PyeongChang Winter Games on February 9th next year. Stay tuned for these stories and more. President Moon Jae-in has addressed the National Assembly for the second time since taking office. While delivering his speech, President Moon also focused a great deal on the state of the nation's economy. We now connect to our Hwang Ho-jun, who is at the Blue House. Ho-jun, what can you tell us?
Myung-gil, during his speech, the president hinted the government will play a bigger role to ensure the transformation of Korea into be more democratic and just society. He started off his address by reflecting on the 1997 Asian financial crisis. Although the nation has recovered from the financial nightmare, President Moon said the shadow of the crisis still haunts the Korean people and the economy today, pointing to low growth, unemployment, and long working hours. President Moon did give credit to the chaebols enabling the nation to achieve astonishing economic development that no other country has witnessed since the end of World War II. But with stagnating growth and the difficulties people now face, President Moon asserted the chaebol-centered economy is now outdated, and the government must reassess how the nation's wealth is distributed, paving the way for his administration's people-centered economy. Now, the president said it's more than a mere slogan and reiterated the concept comes in the context of three key pillars: income-driven growth, innovative growth, and a fair economy. And to defend his declaration for an extreme economic makeover, President Moon emphasized Seoul is not alone in taking such effort. Take a listen.
G20 정상회의, IMF, OECD, 다보스 포럼에서도 양극화 해소와 포용적 성장, 그리고 사람 중심 경제가 화두였습니다. 유엔 총회도 사람을 중심으로를 주제로 삼았습니다.
Now, Ho-jun, and it seems next year's budget the government proposed to the parliament will likely reflect such efforts.
That's right. According to the president, the total expenditures in 2018's budget amount to 429 trillion won, which is about 385 billion US dollars, a 7.1% rise over the current year and the highest annual increase since the global financial crisis. He assured the budget, which was acquired after intensive restructuring of non-essential budgetary items, will mainly focus on creating more jobs, increasing household income, cultivating innovative growth, and improving public safety and security. President Moon added that part of this year's budget was formed by the participation of ordinary citizens, as a public survey of around 1,000 people has been carried out to identify useful projects. 6 projects were selected, including safe rental units for women and infrastructure to allow people to work from home. President Moon said he will enhance public participation in the formulation of future budget plans as well. This has been Hwang Ho-jun for Business Daily.
Thank you, Ho-jun. Focusing more on the Moon Jae-in administration's budget proposal, the budget plan will now go through a deliberation process in the National Assembly. It will start on Thursday and take around a month, but given the large amount of funds being requested, it looks as though the process will not be smooth sailing. Our Yoo Jun-hee has more on what the 2018 budget might look like if the president gets his way.
The timer has started on the Moon Jae-in government's budget plan for next year, which, according to the president, will improve the livelihoods of ordinary Koreans. Weighing in at a hefty 383 billion US dollars, the proposed budget will be 12.9% higher than the one allocated for this year. More than 2/3 is set to be earmarked for a variety of job creation and social welfare programs as part of President Moon's campaign pledge. The biggest bone of contention between rival parties is the government's plan to add some 174,000 new jobs in the public sector over the next 5 years. The ruling party's $357.5 million extra payroll budget would only cover the salaries of 15,000 new public servants in the central administration next year. no separate funds have been allocated to regional governments to meet their quota of hiring new workers. The country's minimum wage could also fuel heated debate among lawmakers, with the government eyeing a series of further hikes after raising it by 16.4% for next year. The National Assembly's Budget Committee estimates President Moon's pledge to raise the minimum wage to 10,000 won, or roughly $9 an hour, could cost the government some $6.5 billion in wage support measures by 2020. Critics are doubtful about whether the government's spending boost can be sustained without running a deficit, which could require a broad tax hike on the middle class. After a series of meetings and deliberations by the Parliamentary Budget Committee and relevant ministries, the bill will be put up for a vote in the National Assembly's next plenary session on December 2nd. Yoo Jun-hee, Business Daily.
Korea's preliminary exports data for October shows continued growth in outbound shipments on the back of semiconductors, but the pace is a bit slower than in previous months. Our Kim Hae-sung has the details.
Korea has posted 12 months of consecutive export growth. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said Wednesday the nation's exports in October hit $45 billion, up 7.1% from the previous year. The figure marks a slowdown from September's 35% surge after a double-digit expansion in every previous month this year. But the Trade Ministry remains optimistic about the preliminary October exports figure, saying it grew despite 4.5 fewer working days in the month compared with the previous year. Based on the daily average, exports grew from September's $2.4 billion to $2.5 billion in October, showing a continuous growth trend. Outbound shipments to the U.S. dropped 12% on year on falling automobile and machinery exports. But shipments to China and ASEAN countries increased on the back of strong demand in semiconductors, ships, and petroleum products. In particular, $9.7 billion worth of semiconductors were exported, a near 70% jump on year. Petroleum products posted higher growth thanks to rising oil prices and falling supply of petroleum goods from China. South Korea's exports have been on a steady rise since November 2016 thanks to an upturn in oil prices and recovering global trade.
If this growth trend continues, exports could hit $1 trillion this year. But North Korea remains a downside risk, and protectionist sentiment in the US and tightening monetary policy in Europe could lead to a contraction in global trade in the mid to long run.
Along with exports, inbound shipments to the country also rose, up 7.4% on year at $37.7 billion last month. Kim Hae-sung, Business Daily.
Korea's inflation grew at its slowest pace in 10 months in October, logging a 1.8% gain on year. Statistics Korea said the slowdown was owed to a drop in food prices after a recent spike caused by unfavorable weather conditions. With that, the country's consumer price index logged its weakest growth since last December, when it rose 1.3%. It's also the first time since June that prices grew below 2%, while core inflation, excluding volatile oil and food prices, gained 1.6%. The Statistics Bureau says it will closely monitor inflation as winter season approaches. China and Korea are taking steps to repair bilateral ties soured over the Seoul's decision to deploy a U.S. THAAD missile defense battery. Unfortunately, even if tensions are resolved immediately, it will take time for businesses to recover from the fallout, amid growing calls to reduce their reliance on China. Our Elliot Kim has a story.
Yesterday, Korean businesses received a welcome reprieve from recent struggles as Seoul and Beijing announced they will repair their relationship that had cooled over their disagreements on THAAD. Tour groups are set to return and sales in China should increase. But could the damage be irreparable? Lotte Duty Free is estimated to have already lost over $447 million.
The APEC summit is expected to normalize the relationship between China and Korea, but it may take some time before the duty-free market recovers, as flights need to be secured and travel goods manufactured.
Other domestic companies like cosmetics firm Amore Pacific will look to make the most of the revival in tourism with aggressive marketing. Their new campaign will involve everything from launching new products catered to Chinese tourists to special welcoming events. battery makers Samsung SDI and LG Chem had been excluded from receiving subsidies by the Chinese government, but now they expect to see a sharp change in the market.
After the difficulties over THAAD, we hope the reconciliation between Korea and China and revamped local efforts will improve the business environment in China.
Hyundai Motor, which has seen sales drop 37% on year through September, is also hoping to rebound. But expectations are muted as the company's hands are tied due to the sharp plunge in earnings. The company says it's learned its lesson and will reduce its reliance on the Chinese market.
It's difficult to be less reliant on the Chinese market in the short term, but it does need to be gradually reduced.
The recovery will be gradual, and with anti-Korean sentiment still being propagated within China, it can take some time for ordinary Chinese citizens to turn around as well. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
Now moving on to our coverage of the markets, we have our markets contributor, Jamie Kim, joining us on the line. Hello, Jamie.
Hello.
So tell us how local stocks performed on this Wednesday.
Right, the main index Kospi soared to another record peak of 2556.47 points, rising 1.31% from yesterday. Analysts say that positive corporate earnings from the U.S. combined with growing anticipation for a rate freeze in the U.S. lifted investor sentiment. The tech-heavy Kospi stock closed 0.23% higher at 695.77 points.
And could you give us a more detailed breakdown of the market action for us, Jamie?
Sure. Institutional and retail investors were mainly sellers, but foreigners turned into buyers, snapping up nearly 300 billion won worth of shares. Samsung Electronics, the number one market cap, rose 3.89% to another record high to underpin the broader market. News of greater shareholder returns has given the stock a major boost in addition to record high quarterly earnings. Earlier this week, Samsung said it is planning to set aside more than $25 billion in dividends. A boardroom reshuffle is also adding to expectations that the company will soon recover from its leadership vacuum. Samsung Group affiliated stocks are generally on the rise, with Samsung SDI jumping 8.98% and Samsung Life also up 1.85%. Among other blue chip stocks, Hyundai Motor shed 0.31%, while POSCO fell 0.46%.
So what market events do we have lined up for the remainder of this week, Jimmy?
Well, later today, the U.S. Fed will announce its rate decision after wrapping up its monthly policy meeting. And tomorrow on Thursday, Japan will announce its Consumer Confidence Index for October. Also on the same day, the Bank of England will announce its rate decision, while on Friday, the U.S. will be releasing its non-farm payroll data for October. This has been Jamie Kim for Business Daily.
The average salary of Korean workers ranked in the bottom half among OECD members last year, with its growth rate also hovering below the median over the past 6 years. According to the National Assembly's Finance Committee on Wednesday, the average income of wage earners last year was around $29,000. That places Korea 23rd out of the 34 OECD member states. Switzerland topped the list with a salary of $85,000 on average, followed by Iceland with $73,000 and the U.S. with $60,000. Korean salaries grew by an average of 3.8% between 2010 and 2016, much lower than the OECD average of nearly 5.4%. The World Bank has heaped praise on South Korea, saying it's the world's fourth best country to do business in. The country moved up one spot in the rankings compared to last year. Park Ji-won has more.
In its annual Doing Business 2018 report, the World Bank gave South Korea its highest overall ranking ever, fourth place out of 190 countries surveyed. The global ranking analyzed how conducive the business environment is to the starting and operation of a local firm by looking at 11 subcategories, such as registering property, construction permits, and protecting minority investors. Korea received especially high marks in the ease of enforcing contracts and getting electricity. But it got lower marks in the category of getting credit, registering property, and trading across borders. New Zealand topped this year's list, followed by Singapore and Denmark. Hong Kong, which was ranked fourth last year, conceded the place to South Korea this year.
The United States, UK, and Norway are also included the top 8 countries for doing business. Japan was ranked 34th, while China came 78th. The World Bank has published this annual report since 2003, and this year's report used data as of June 1, 2017. Park Ji-won, Business Daily.
The Olympic flame for next year's PyeongChang Winter Games is here. Back in Korea again after 30 years, a Korean delegation in charge of the Olympic flame arrived in Incheon International Airport on Wednesday after a handover ceremony in Athens. Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun and former Olympic figure skating champion Kim Yeon-ah lit up a cauldron set up on the airport's runway. With it, the Olympic flame has been brought to Korea for the first time since the Seoul Summer Olympics in 1988. A torch relay across the nation will start today, covering some 2,018 kilometers until the opening ceremony on February 9th, 2018. And so it is. Today, November 1st, marks D-100 to the long-awaited PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games. Many events are being held nationwide to mark the occasion, including at the Gwanghwamun Square right here in Seoul. Eunice Kim shows us where we stand in the preparations and what the cost is shaping up to be.
It's back. For the first time since the 1988 Summer Games, the Olympic flame has returned to Korea. Touching down in Incheon, it will make a 2,018-kilometer journey through all of the country's provinces and major cities before arriving at the Olympic Stadium in PyeongChang on February 9th. 100 days to the Winter Games, what Korea's chief organizer Lee Hee-bum has characterized as a dream realized.
Korea is only the second Asian nation to have the honor of hosting the Winter Games.
Organizers say the venues are 99% complete. The global sporting event will take place near the eastern coast of Korea, a 2.5-hour car ride from Seoul, a distance to be made shorter by a brand new high-speed railway. The mountains of PyeongChang will host snow sports like snowboarding, while nearby Gangneung will be the site of ice sports like speed and figure skating. Organizers were able to keep costs under control by constructing just 6 of the 12 shiny venues from the ground up, while renovating the rest. By doing so, facility costs were pared down to about $786 million, less than a quarter of the average spent in the past 4 Winter Games. Thousands of athletes from 100 countries will descend with dreams of Olympic gold in 15 sporting categories. PyeongChang 2018 will have on hand the most gold medals ever for the Winter Games, as well as the largest number of mixed events in all of Olympic history. Also arriving will be an estimated 390,000 foreign visitors, for whom programs are already being put into place, as well as a super-fast 5G network that will be powered by Intel on KT's platform. With the hosting of the Games, organizers hope to launch the region even higher into the stratosphere of global winter sports destinations. With the newly laden facilities and high-tech infrastructure, they estimate the economic windfall over the coming decade will be in the tens of billions of dollars. To ensure this, plans are already being drawn up on how to utilize the sporting venues long after the Olympics are over, even as they fret over the finishing touches. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
The government met with industry officials from the solar sector to discuss recent safeguard proposals by the U.S. International Trade Commission. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said it will do its best to prevent U.S. imports regulations on Korea's solar cells and modules. It added a formal complaint to the World Trade Organization is also a possible option in case the restrictions become inevitable. The ITC recommended tariffs ranging from 30% to 35% on imported solar products from Korea. Industry officials say while this is significantly lower than what was initially requested, the tariffs are still expected to deal a heavy blow to the domestic solar industry. Korea's interest rate limit on loans will now be lowered to 24% starting from February 8th, with the proposal receiving cabinet approval. The Financial Services Commission said this rate will not only be applied to private lenders but also across all financial institutions as well. The government said the limit has steadily fallen from what was 66% back in 2002 and will come up with additional measures to further push down the rate. While this new regulation does not apply to existing loans, it will be implemented on loan renewals and maturity extensions starting from January next year. Those that charge interest rates above the legal limit will face up to 3 years in prison or a fine of up to $26,000. Korea has come a long way since the horrific Korean War divided the country in two and left it in a pile of ashes. Not only did this country miraculously become one of the world's wealthiest nations in the world, it also made the fastest transition from aid recipient to aid donor. Our Oh Jung-hee sheds light on Korea's efforts to help countries in need.
With natural disasters and political instability, Afghanistan has approximately 10 million people who are food insecure. Malnutrition and stunted growth are the most prominent problems. To seek stronger support from the Korean government, Mick Lawrenson, the World Food Program country director in Afghanistan, made his way to Seoul. Seoul has been supporting the WFP's programs in Afghanistan since 2013 and is now the second largest donor. Mr. Lawrenson says the agency's joint project with Korea on soybeans has contributed greatly to improving local nutrition. Citizens are trained to grow soybeans, a crop common in Korea but not in Afghanistan. Then harvested beans are used in various foods like naan bread or milk.
Things like the soybean bread and the naan has been accepted. They like the taste. Obviously, you do sampling. That seems to have worked very well. And as I learnt yesterday at the Seoul Bean Museum, there are many, many uses for soybean. So we're trying to introduce things gradually, given the protein, a high content of protein and fiber and everything else in there. It's a product that really does have a good use in Afghanistan.
Korea provides assistance to roughly 30 countries every year through the UN's Food Relief Agency. A major transformation for Korea, as it was once one of the agency's major recipients. From 1964 to 1984, Korea received World Food Program assistance worth over $100 million for over 20 programs nationwide.
The Republic of Korea graduated from WFP assistance in 20 years, and in one generation, it became top 20 donor. This is a really remarkable feat. So ROK is not only a donor, but actually achieved zero hunger. So it sends out the message of hope to other countries. Zero hunger is indeed possible.
South Korea has become one of the international community's major donor countries. And while most of its food assistance has been given through cash contributions, the Seoul government now hopes to go one step further and provide in-kind assistance to those countries in need. Seoul's Agriculture Ministry is planning to join the Food Assistance Convention, or the FAC, next year. The FAC is a 14-nation convention, including the US, the European Union, and Canada, that aims to promote global food security and provide humanitarian food assistance to developing countries. If the parliament approves the membership this year, Korea will ship 50,000 tons of rice next year, worth roughly $40 million. It's expected to not only meet the most imminent global needs, but also alleviate domestic overproduction of rice.
There were ups and downs in rice production before, but during recent years, we've seen constant oversupply of rice from 200 to 300,000 tons every year. So we see that there won't be shortage of rice even if we export some for food assistance. Korea now has the capacity.
While Korea's assistance will be used for countries in emergencies, concerns remain about whether in-kind assistance is compatible with long-term development. It may rather bring down crop prices in local markets and thereby curtail earnings for local farmers.
The side effect of giving in-kind food assistance is that the local economy may depend more and more on food from overseas. What's more practical is to discuss together with local authorities and come up with models on how to achieve economic and social development. Korea is very strong on that too.
It's been a long journey for South Korea since the mid-1900s to now become one of the world's largest economies. And what enabled that is not only Korea's own efforts for development, but support from the international community. From food to technology to development experience, Korea has lots to share with the world. 오정희, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today, but we'll be back tomorrow with more of the day's top business stories, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and see you soon.